Cliff, we just got through with Easter yesterday. And the big event coming up next is this panel that we're doing next Sunday evening.
Right.
For Orphan Sunday.
Right.
Why Orphan Sunday right after Easter?
Yeah,
That feels...
Yeah, what's the relationship between those two things? Since we just observed Easter, it seems like the next logical thing to do would be to see what difference does that make. So for a believer, for example, we celebrated as a church an empty tomb. Christ is risen. And we have to say, so what difference does that make? And that's where Orphan Sunday comes in. It's this idea that it's the actual expression of what I do as a believer. In Matthew 5, in verse 14, Jesus starts describing, he's given the characteristics of a disciple, and now he says, disciples are this. And the first thing he starts with, he says, you are the light of the world. He uses that, and he goes through verses 14, 15, and 16. He says, a city on a hill cannot be hidden. You don't light a light and hide it away. You make it shine. In order to relate it to Orphan Sunday, we kind of have to jump back to a book in the Old Testament. Okay. And it's Isaiah. And it's Isaiah 58.
That's a good one to jump back to.
That's a good one to jump back to. That's exactly right. We're going to jump back to Isaiah 58. Okay. And in Isaiah 58, God says to Isaiah, tell my people, I see that you like being my people. He says, I see that you like following the things that I've given you to do, the ordinances, the worship style, the fasts, the Sabbaths. It's kind of like, when we are with the band and we have the little badge and we get to go in the backstage door, it's God saying, I see you people. You're holding out your badge and you're going, we're with the band, we're with the man, we're with God. God sees it and he says, I see that you're doing these things. He says you're fasting, you're putting ashes on your bed and sitting on those. You're bowing your heads, you're observing all of these things to give yourself this false humility. He says, but I also see that on that same Sabbath, you're literally fist fighting, you're oppressing people, you are pursuing your own pleasure, your own delights. And he says, that's not what I wanted. When God says something one time, we ought to listen.
Right.
If he said something 2 times, we should probably write it down and make sure we do it.
Right. Pastor says that a lot.
Exactly. What if he says it 24 times?
24 times.
24 times.
Okay.
God says, care for widows and orphans. So 24 times throughout Scripture, we have this idea that God's heart is for widows and orphans by telling us, his people, care for them and don't oppress them. 24 times in Scripture. He tells us to do this. I think he means it.
In Matthew 5, we're told to display our Christianity.
That's right.
And Isaiah defines that Christianity as tending to,
That's right.
to the needy. So are you saying that people who don't adopt or are not fully displaying their Christianity?
Honestly, we have to be careful to point out the fact that not everyone is, as we say, called to foster an adoption. But it's kind of like evangelism. People say a lot of the time, I don't have the spiritual gift of evangelism, and so therefore I'm not responsible. I can't do that. That's exactly right. As an individual, we can contribute to things like the Rainbow Room here in Jefferson County that provides supplies for children in that situation. You can adopt a foster worker. You can get to know when their birthday is.
Adopt a foster worker?
Yeah, it's funny.
Okay.
You send them cards of support. You pray for them. You get to know when their birthday is, and you tell them happy birthday. You just become a lifeline, a support network for that.
Source of encouragement.
And that's one of the things that we're going to talk about, as many things actually, on that Sunday night at Orphan Sunday. And we're going to talk about statistics. Statistics tend to get a little dry, so right. I don't like to go there a lot. But the fact of the matter is that if just one church out of every 3 in this country took one child out of the child welfare system by adoption, just one church out of 3, we would end the orphan crisis overnight.
Well, when you say in the orphan crisis, you mean like...
There would be no more children available for adoption. All those children that are waiting for forever homes.
One family.
One church. Not one family. One church That's right.
You think about just like Beaumont. I mean, how many churches are in Beaumont?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
If every third church had one family in it that adopted,
one child,
orphanism overnight.
Let's say that happened all in one fell swoop. There would be no more orphans. That's how attainable. The crisis is huge, but that's how attainable this direction that God has given us. And here's the sweet thing. God doesn't condition this and say, you will do this and there's no other way. He says, I promise you. You cry out to me now and you say, I don't hear you. It's because you're not doing what I've asked you to do. You're not living that life. But if you do these things and you cry out to me, then I will hear you. I will let your light shine. It says in Isaiah, your light will shine forth like the dawn. It sounds a lot like Matthew 5.
Yeah.
He says, I will answer you. I will help you. I will strengthen you. I will protect you. I will water you. I will feed you. I will guard you. And then this is what I really like. In Isaiah 58:12, he says, and then you will become known as the people who rebuild their cities. That sounds like something we could use around here.